Of course, a lot more news expected over the weekend as well. Let's get a little bit more insight on the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and the role the FDIC, is going to play going forward. Joining us now from San Francisco is Bloomberg's Priya Anand. She's currently at a SVB bank trying to talk to those customers. Priya, we've heard now that the FDIC is expected to take over, I believe, on Monday. Walk us through the timeline here. What are next steps?
Well, I think a lot of the industry is waiting to find out what those next steps look like for them. People are still figuring things out. I'm in their lobby of their San Francisco office, which is more of an office as opposed to a branch. And there's a very slow trickle of customers coming in. The office, it seems like nobody's up there right now, but there's a very slow trickle of customers coming in, and they have a sign posted with their address for the Palo Alto branch on Sand Hill Road, and they're telling folks to go over there. And we have colleagues out there as well looking to talk to customers. And people right now are just wondering what will happen to their funds. I've been speaking with investors all day, venture capitalists all day, who are working with their portfolio companies to figure out what this might mean for them. There are concerns I've heard around making payroll for some startups in this industry because they may have had cash sitting with SVB that they used for payroll, and that could very well be over $250K. So I think right now there's a lot of shock in the tech industry. I have been texting and speaking on the phone with investors all morning, as I was all day yesterday. And this morning I messaged someone and said, what happens now? I messaged a venture capitalist who has a long history in the industry, and he responded and said pandemonium. And I don't want to make it sound alarmist, but there are a lot of people wondering what happens now. This year was already looking very tough for startups in a tougher funding environment. Startups constantly need to raise money to keep going. And I've posed this question to everyone I've talked to today. You know, this seems like it's a very ominous sign in a year that people already thought was going to be tough, and nobody has disputed that. It seems like a very ominous sign for an industry that was already wondering what this year was going to look like.
Is such sobering context, but really insightful, Priya. And maybe we should just remind people about how things have been unfolding. I mean, the good times within the tech industry just a couple of years ago helped to fuel the rise of Silicon Valley Bank. And it does appear that with all that capital coming in, there were some calculations made, I suppose, on whether or not interest rates would make a big move, and when ultimately that seemed to go against their own beliefs, then that forced this issue that we've been talking about this week, the reality of selling some of their securities at a loss to raise capital, the news about the stock sale, and the reaction within the VC community, their concerns around maintaining capital, very influential VCs speaking to their portfolio companies about getting out. Priya, can you just walk us through at least some of those steps that got us to this point that you've been reporting on?
Yeah, I mean, well, so like you said, the past couple of years, money was flowing very easily in Silicon Valley. People were raising at very high valuations. Companies with, you know, sometimes sound business models, sometimes not, were easily able to raise boatloads of funds. That all sort of started to grind to a halt last year. And since yesterday, the last 24 hours in particular, it seems like venture capitalists and their portfolio companies have been in a mad dash to figure out, or were until today, throughout yesterday, in a mad dash to figure out over the course of yesterday, should we have our companies move money out of Silicon Valley Bank? Should we have faith in Silicon Valley Bank, which is such a storied institution in this industry, right? I mean, they provide specialized banking services for startups. It's their bread and butter. As you can tell from it literally being called Silicon Valley Bank. And it seemed at one point yesterday, there started to be a bit of a herd mentality around, you know what, a lot of people are moving their money, and people are talking about moving their money. And VCs are advising their own portfolios to move their money. So I think other people started to look around and say, should we also move our money then? And it seems like that herd mentality has really, it kind of shows Silicon Valley everyone likes to talk about being a contrarian in the tech industry. And I think maybe this scenario shows us that there actually isn't that much contrarianism here.